Actually, nowadays, I don't think people are, maybe under supervision, I'm not endorsing it, but I would say that even Cary Grant, under supervision, needed to, because when you take it, it's also like a snake shedding all beliefs. You know, somebody sat with me not long ago and asked me something I wasn't expecting. They said, Carlos, you've been in music your whole life. Who are the 5 greatest musicians you ever knew? And I went quiet. Not because I couldn't answer, because the answer came so fast, it surprised me. People ask me about technique all the time, which scales, which tone, which amplifier. And I don't mind that. I can talk about tone for a long time. Ask me about sustain and we might be here until tomorrow. But that's the surface of the thing, that's the skin. What I'm really talking about when I talk about music isn't technique at all. It's transmission. It's whether something real is moving from one human being to another, whether something invisible is becoming something you can actually feel in your chest. Most musicians play notes. A few of them play something else entirely. I grew up in Otlanda, Navarro in Mexico, watching my father play violin. He was a beautiful musician. He showed me that music wasn't entertainment, it was conversation. A conversation was something much larger than yourself. And when I eventually got to San Francisco and started hearing what was happening there, I realized that conversation could go further than I'd imagined. Much further. I've been lucky, genuinely lucky. Not in the way people mean when they say lucky and really mean successful. I mean lucky in the sense that I was allowed to stand close to certain people, to feel what came off them when they played, to have a few conversations that I still carry with me now, decades later, word for word. B.B. King had it. Coltrane had it in a way that was almost frightening. Miles had it and knew he had it, which is its own thing entirely. Jimmy had it for the short time the world got to keep him. And Buddy, well, Buddy had something that didn't always make the headlines, but it was completely real. These aren't the 5 most decorated musicians I ever met. They're the 5 who opened the door furthest. And the first one I have to talk about is B.B. King. B.B. was my father in the blues. I don't use that phrase lightly. My actual father gave me music. B.B. gave me the blues specifically. And the blues is a different education altogether. It teaches you things that no conservatory in the world can teach you. It teaches you that one note played with complete conviction is worth more than 1,000 notes played with none. I first saw B.B. play when I was still very young and finding my way. And I remember thinking, this man isn't performing, he's testifying. There's a difference. A performer wants you to watch. Someone testifying doesn't particularly care whether you're watching or not. They have something they need to say, and they're going to say it regardless. B.B. named his guitar Lucille. People smile at that. I never smiled at it. I understood it completely. When you develop that kind of relationship with your instrument, it stops being an object. It becomes a collaborator. I felt the same thing with my own guitar. B.B. just had the courage to say it out loud. What people sometimes miss about B.B. is the space. He'd play a note and then he'd let it breathe. He'd let it say what it needed to say before moving on to the next one. That restraint is harder than any technique. Any young player can fill up every second with sound, learning to trust the silence, learning to let one note carry the whole weight. That takes years. B.B. had it naturally, or maybe he'd worked so hard for so long that it became natural. With certain people you can't always tell the difference. When I got to know him personally, what struck me was his generosity. He didn't hoard what he knew. He gave it away. He'd sit with young musicians and talk to them like they mattered, like their questions deserved real answers. I've met very famous people who couldn't do that. B.B. did it without thinking. Here is the thing I don't say enough, and probably should. Toward the end of B.B.'s life, we were both moving in different directions. Different tours, different worlds, different schedules. And I told myself there would always be another time to just sit with him. Not talk about music, not play together, just sit. The way you sit with someone who means something to you, and let that mean something. I never did that. And when he passed in 2015, that unfinished afternoon became the thing I carry. Not the concerts we shared, not the stages. That one afternoon that never happened. He also laughed easily. I always trust people who laugh easily. It means they're comfortable with themselves. B.B. was comfortable with himself in a way that took me a long time to understand. He knew who he was. He knew what he was for. And that certainty came through in every single note he played. When BB left us, I felt it in my hands. That's the only way I can describe it. Not in my heart, not in my head, in my hands, because that's where he lived for me, in the place where music actually happens. Now, if BB was the father, then the next man I want to talk about was something closer to a prophet. And prophets, you don't always get to meet them in person. Sometimes they find you another way entirely. The next person is John Coltrane. Coltrane is someone I have to approach carefully because the feeling is so large that ordinary words don't quite cover it. Some musicians change the way you hear music. Coltrane changed the way I heard everything, not just music, conversations, rain, traffic, silence. After Coltrane, all of it sounded different. I came to Coltrane's music when I was still becoming whoever I was going to be, and A Love Supreme did something to me that I've spent the rest of my life trying to understand properly. It wasn't a jazz record to me. It wasn't any kind of record, actually. It was a prayer, a long, structured, completely honest prayer. And I realized that music could be that the guitar could be used for that de midden kunnen sammer dan de dan se te farmi man sammer to that to me and it's something pieta minan or the same thing. You couldn't play honestly without bringing your whole self. You couldn't bring your whole self without acknowledging something beyond yourself. That philosophy became the center of everything I've tried to do. And here is my real pain around Coltrane. He passed in July of 1967. I was breaking through. Woodstock came 2 years later. The whole world was opening up for me, and Coltrane was already gone. I never got to sit in the same room as him, never got to shake his hand, never got to say, "You changed the direction of my life, and I want you to know that." That is a wound that has no clean edges. You can't grieve someone you never met the way you grieve someone you knew, but you can miss what was never possible, and I have missed that conversation my entire life. What Coltrane gave me was permission to take the music seriously as a spiritual practice, permission to go further than was comfortable, permission to ask more of myself and more of whoever was listening. That's not a small thing for a young guitarist from Mexico standing on the edge of something enormous. That permission meant everything. And then there was a man who gave permission in an entirely different way, not through records, through one phone call that I still think about today. The next person is Miles Davis. Miles is someone you have to talk about carefully because Miles himself was careful about everything, every note, every silence, every word. He didn't waste anything. The first time I heard Miles, I didn't understand it. That's the honest answer. I heard Kind of Blue, and I thought I understood it, but I was only hearing the surface. It took years before I heard what was underneath. That's what great music does. It rewards you differently depending on who you are when you come to it. When I eventually met Miles in person, he looked at me for a long moment before saying anything. I remember feeling like I was being read, like he was deciding something. Then he started talking about music, and everything else disappeared. Miles understood silence the way other musicians understood sound. He knew that what you don't play is just as important as what you do, maybe more important. He'd leave these spaces in the music that seemed like they should be filled, and then you'd realize the space was the point. The space was where the listener lived. He was making room for you inside the music. I've never forgotten that. He was not easy, I'll say that plainly. Miles was not a man you could be casual around without paying for it eventually. He had very little patience for anything that wasn't real. If something wasn't honest, he could feel it immediately, and he'd let you know. Not always kindly, but always clearly. What I regret is this. Toward the end of Miles's life, he was ill, and I knew it, and I still let time pass, the way you let time pass when you think there is more of it than there actually is. Our last meeting, I felt the weight of everything I hadn't said sitting right there in the room with us. I wanted to tell him what that phone call after Woodstock had meant, what it felt like to have Miles Davis call you and say he believed in what you were doing. I didn't say it clearly enough. I said something close to it, and then the moment moved on the way moments do. He passed in 1991, and that half-finished conversation has been with me ever since. What I loved about Miles was that he never stopped moving. Every time you thought you understood what he was doing, he was already somewhere else. Miles showed me that an artist's job isn't to repeat what worked, The job is to follow the music wherever it wants to go. That was a difficult lesson. It was also one of the most necessary ones. But if Miles taught me to follow the music, then the next person showed me what it looked like when someone followed it all the way to the edge without flinching even once. The next person I want to talk about is Jimi Hendrix. Jimmy is one of those people where time has turned him into something so large that it can be hard to talk about the actual human being. People see the photographs, they hear the records, they read about Woodstock, and all of that is real. But there was also just a fellow, a very warm, very quiet fellow actually, when he wasn't on stage. I met Jimmy at Woodstock in 1969. I was 22 years old and terrified in the best possible way. The whole thing was unlike anything I'd experienced. And then there was Jimmy, and I remember looking at him and thinking, this person is on a completely different frequency. Not better, not worse, different, like he was tuned to something the rest of us could only occasionally pick up. He was kind to me, that's what I remember first. He didn't have to be. He was already Jimi Hendrix. He could have been whatever a person becomes when the whole world is paying attention, but he was kind. He talked to me like we were two musicians trying to figure out the same thing, which I suppose we were. When Jimmy played, it was physical. Everybody says that, and it's true, but it doesn't quite capture it. It wasn't just that you felt it in your body. It was that he seemed to play from his body, from somewhere below thought, like the music was moving through him rather than coming from him. But here is what I don't talk about enough. Woodstock was almost the only real time we had. We spoke a handful of times after, made plans the way musicians make plans, loosely, without enough urgency. And then September 1970 came, and Jimmy was gone, 27 years old. I was 23. And I remember standing there thinking, we were just getting started. He was just getting started. The conversations we were going to have, the music we talked about making together, all of it disappeared with him. I have never fully made my peace with that. I'm not sure I'm supposed to. The music he was moving toward, the next thing, whatever it was going to be, we never got to hear it. That's the part that still hurts if I let myself think about it properly. Not what he made, what he was heading toward. But I carry him. Every time I pick up the guitar and try to go somewhere beyond the comfortable place, I think about Jimmy. He showed all of us that the guitar had rooms in it nobody had found yet. I'm still looking for those rooms. And then there's the last person on this list. And this one is different from the others, because this friendship wasn't about reverence. It wasn't about a legend or a prophet or a door opening. It was just about two people who found each other, made music, and called each other brother. The last person I want to talk about is Buddy Miles. Buddy doesn't always appear on the lists people make. That tells you more about lists than it tells you about Buddy. We made music together. We spent real time together. And Buddy was one of those people who reminded you what music was actually for when you were in danger of forgetting. Because you can forget. Success can make you forget. Comfort can make you forget. Buddy never let me forget. He played drums the way some people breathe, without apparent effort and yet with everything behind it. When Buddy got behind a drum kit, the whole room reorganized itself around him, not because he was loud, though he could certainly be loud, because he was committed every single time. You couldn't watch Buddy play and feel casual about your own instrument. He made that impossible. Off stage, Buddy was tremendous, funny in a way that could completely derail whatever you were supposed to be doing. He had these stories, these long, extraordinary stories, and he'd tell them with this absolute certainty that you were going to love them, and you always did. He'd come into a room, and immediately it was a different room, warmer, louder, more alive. And this is the thing that keeps me up sometimes. In the later years, life pulled us in different directions. The gap between conversations got longer. I'd think about calling, and then something would come up, and I'd tell myself later. Later is a dangerous word. Later becomes never faster than you expect. When Buddy passed in 2008, there was so much unfinished between us. Things I should have said while I still could. Gratitude I should have made specific instead of assumed. Brothers assume too much sometimes. We think the other one already knows. Sometimes they do. But you should still say it. We went through things together, the good years and some difficult ones. That's what makes a friendship real, not the celebrations, the difficult ones. Buddy showed up for both. He was the kind of person who called when things were hard, not just when things were easy. When Buddy passed, I lost a brother. Not a colleague, not a collaborator, a brother. And brothers are not replaceable, regardless of how many wonderful people come into your life afterward. I still hear him sometimes. When I'm playing and something starts to move right, when the band locks in and the whole thing lifts, I hear Buddy's drums underneath it somewhere. That's where he lives now, inside the music we made together. So, when I put all those names together, I start to understand something about my own life. BB showed me that one honest note is worth more than 1,000 dishonest ones. Coltrane showed me that music and spirit are the same conversation. Miles showed me that silence is not the absence of music, it is music. Jimmy showed me that the guitar still has rooms nobody has found yet. And Buddy showed me what a real brother sounds like when he's sitting behind the drums. None of them got there the same way. That's what I find beautiful about it. There is no correct path. There is only the path you walk with complete commitment. These 5 walked theirs all the way to the end, without looking back. I've spent my whole life trying to play with that kind of honesty. Some nights I get close, some nights I don't, but I keep going back because of what these people showed me was possible. When you've been close to musicians like this, ordinary is no longer an option. Music gave me everything I have, but these 5 people showed me what music was really capable of. And after all these years, I still feel it every time I pick up the guitar. That feeling doesn't age. It doesn't retire. It just keeps asking you to go further. And I always try.